Feel with the vibes, no need to worry about confirmations.
I mean, that is quite the statement when you really stop and look at it.
It really is. Well, welcome to today's deep dive. We're jumping right into the deep end today because that phrase, feel with the vibes, no need to worry about confirmations. It's something that I think for anyone who has ever made a snap decision based purely on a gut feeling, it just feels incredibly validating.
Oh, for sure.
Like if you're listening to this right now and you've ever just known something,
Right.
right, without knowing exactly how you knew it, this philosophy sounds like permission to just, trust yourself.
Yeah, exactly. It feels good.
Right. But it begs a massive question. Is this actually good advice to live by? Like, universally?
Well, our mission for this deep dive is to answer exactly that. We are inspecting an analytical brief that breaks down the tension, really the psychological, practical, and philosophical tension between intuitive cognition, which is, what we mean when we say our vibe.
Our gut feelings.
Exactly. The tension between those vibes and empirical verification, which are our confirmations. So the goal here is to really separate the validated, scientifically backed benefits of intuitive thinking from the extreme and, frankly, like dangerous risks of completely abandoning factual verification.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because
Sure.
before we just completely write off the word vibes as, just some internet slang or a fleeting pop culture trend, we first need to establish that the underlying mechanism here is real.
Right.
It is a documented psychological phenomenon.
Yeah.
It's not just a made-up concept.
No, not at all. When we talk about a vibe in a clinical or psychological context, what we are really talking about is rapid pattern recognition.
Okay.
Like, the human brain is essentially a predictive supercomputer, and it is constantly processing vast amounts of subconscious data instantaneously.
So it's always running in the background.
Always. So what feels to you like a magical, mystical vibe just sort of descending from the clouds is actually your brain recognizing patterns based on a massive database of your past experiences. Yeah, and it's doing all of this without ever waking up your conscious, analytical thought processes.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like when you instantly catch a falling glass before you even realize it slipped.
Yes, that is a perfect analogy.
Like if we look at the mechanics of that, your eye captures the visual data of the glass tipping, right? But instead of routing that information all the way up to your conscious mind to formulate the full thought, like, oh no, the glass is falling, I should move my hand.
Which would take way too long.
Exactly. Your brain just takes a biological shortcut. It processes the trajectory and sends a motor command to your arm in milliseconds.
Yeah.
So it feels like a reflex, but it's actually incredibly sophisticated high-speed data processing.
Absolutely. And in psychology, we see a broader version of this high-speed processing known as thin slicing.
Thin slicing.
Yeah, thin slicing. It's the cognitive ability to find complex patterns in events based only on thin slices or, incredibly narrow windows of experience.
Okay, so just tiny bits of data.
Right. And research shows that thin slicing, making these highly accurate, very quick decisions with minimal information, it can often rival the accuracy of deliberate, drawn-out decision-making.
Really?
Yeah. But there's the massive caveat here. Thin slicing is only highly accurate when the individual has deep, implicit expertise in that specific area.
Right, so it's not just some random person taking a wild guess.
Not at all. Like, consider a seasoned firefighter. They walk into a burning building and suddenly get this overwhelming bad vibe that tells them to pull their team out immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And then just seconds later, the floor collapses.
Wow.
Now, to an outside observer, it looks like a psychic premonition, right? Like magic.
Modal magic, yeah.
But if we look at the clockwork of what's actually happening, the firefighter's subconscious is detecting subtle anomalies, things like the specific pitch of the wood snapping, or a strange heat differential.
Or like the way the smoke is moving.
Exactly. Smoke moving contrary to normal airflow. The brain thin slices all those tiny data points, compares them to 20 years of firefighting experience, and just sounds the alarm, all before the conscious mind can articulate the physics of structural failure.
That is wild. And it goes way beyond just physical danger, too. Like, the brief points out that this same rapid processing is deeply tied to how we navigate everyday social situations.
Oh, completely. Humans are evolutionarily wired for interpersonal thin slicing. We rely so heavily on nonverbal cues to survive.
Like what kind of cues?
We are talking about microexpressions. These are flashes of emotion across someone's face that last a fraction of a second.
Right, you barely even see them.
You don't consciously see them, but your brain does, along with slight shifts in posture or changes in vocal cadence. The amygdala, which is the brain's threat detection center, processes these visual threat cues milliseconds before the visual cortex even forms a high-resolution image of the person's face.
So you know if they're a threat before you even really know what they look like.
Exactly, because back in our hunter-gatherer days, you simply didn't have the luxury of time to run a background check on a stranger approaching your camp. You had to read their vibe immediately to survive.
Which introduces the whole concept of heuristic efficiency, I think. Because if we demanded absolute empirical confirmation for literally everything in our daily lives.
Oh, it would be a nightmare.
Right. Every minor conversation, every choice at the grocery store, every social interaction, we would suffer from total analysis paralysis. Like our brains would literally overheat.
Yes, the energy preservation aspect is crucial here because the brain consumes about 20% of the body's energy despite being only 2% of its weight. Conscious deliberation is calorically expensive.
It literally burns energy.
It really does. So when the stakes are low and the cost of being wrong is minimal, letting your intuition, your vibes, take the wheel is highly efficient. It preserves our cognitive load for more demanding tasks.
But so, okay, if thin slicing is this incredible evolutionary superpower that kept our ancestors alive and continues to save our brain power today, it begs the question, why does our gut instinct so frequently lead us into disastrous financial or professional or personal decisions?
Yeah, that is the million-dollar question.
Like, why not just live by the title of our source document and ditch the confirmations entirely?
Because that evolutionary superpower has severe vulnerabilities in the modern world. The biggest flaw in relying entirely on vibes is the illusion of neutrality.
The illusion of neutrality. Okay, tell me more about that.
We like to think of our intuition as this pure, uncorrupted processor of reality, right? Like it's just raw truth. But it isn't. When we rely strictly on vibes, we leave our decision-making process highly susceptible to cognitive biases.
But wait, hold on. What if I'm, say, walking to my car in a dark parking garage and I get a genuinely terrible feeling about someone standing in the shadows? I'm not going to stop and look for empirical confirmation in that moment. I'm running. Are you saying I shouldn't trust that survival instinct?
Yeah. No, you should absolutely trust that instinct in a physical survival scenario, like run.
Okay, good.
But the problem arises when we apply that exact same fast-twitch survival mechanism to evaluating complex character or making really nuanced life choices. Because without the safety net of external confirmation, a subjective prejudice can very easily masquerade as a survival instinct or a bad vibe.
So we confuse bias for survival.
Exactly. We see this constantly with the halo effect. Like, if we find someone physically attractive or articulate, our brains wanting to save energy and create a cohesive narrative, they automatically assume that person is also intelligent and trustworthy.
Which is definitely a vibe.
It is a vibe, but it is a profoundly biased one. And conversely, if someone inadvertently reminds you of a person who wronged you in the past, maybe they just share similar mannerisms or vocal tones. Your brain might flag them as a threat. You get a bad vibe, but it isn't a true assessment of their character, right? It's a projection of your own past trauma. And without empirical confirmation, you have literally no mechanism to differentiate between a genuine threat and a personal bias.
The terrifying part is that the physiological feeling, right, the racing heart, the sense of absolute certainty, it feels exactly the same
Virtually
feeling.
identical.
And that leads to a massive structural issue that the brief highlights, which is the universal consensus problem. Like, what happens when two people experience completely conflicting vibes about the exact same situation?
It creates a complete deadlock. Just imagine a boardroom scenario where a hiring committee is evaluating a potential CEO. One executive's vibe says, this person is a visionary disruptor, we must hire them. But another executive's vibe says, this person is a narcissistic con artist, we need to run.
Oh, man.
Because a vibe is an entirely internal, subjective experience, there is no shared vocabulary to resolve the dispute.
You can't put a vibe on a spreadsheet.
Exactly. You can't. And because you can't, the absence of an external confirmation mechanism leaves absolutely no objective way to find the truth.
So what happens?
Well, the discussion just devolves into a test of who is louder, who is more stubborn, or who holds more structural authority. The actual truth of whether the candidate is qualified becomes entirely irrelevant.
That is so true. And if relying purely on vibes breaks down in human resource decisions, it breaks down even harder when we move into assessing purely objective systems.
Oh, vibes fail catastrophically when assessing complex, nonlinear, or empirical systems.
Because those don't care about our feelings.
Right. These are domains that operate on the laws of physics, mathematics, biology. They are completely independent of human perception. You cannot detect a microscopic fracture in a suspension bridge by standing on it and, like, feeling its energy.
Right. I really hope structural engineers aren't doing that.
Seriously. And you cannot sense a miscalculated variable in a macroeconomic financial model through intuition alone, and you certainly cannot diagnose a cellular pathology through a vibe.
No, I would definitely prefer my surgeon to rely on a blood test rather than just looking at me and saying, the vibes are off. Let's remove your gallbladder.
Yeah, exactly. The underlying reality of a medical condition or a structural flaw simply does not care about your feelings. Furthermore, because intuition relies entirely on matching current data to past experiences, as we discussed with pattern recognition,
Right.
the subconscious is rendered totally useless in completely novel environments.
Because if you've never been in a situation before, your brain literally has no historical pattern to draw from.
Exactly. And instead of admitting it doesn't know, the brain will often just hallucinate a vibe.
Hallucinate a vibe.
Yeah, it will cobble together loosely related past experiences and present them to you as a gut feeling, basically cloaking a wild guess in the physiological sensation of absolute certainty.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Because now that we understand the blind spots of our intuition, we need to look at exactly how our cognitive architecture tricks us into making these mistakes in the first place, especially when the stakes are incredibly high.
Right. To understand the mechanics of this, the brief leans on the framework developed by behavioral economist Daniel Kahneman.
Oh, I love his work.
It's brilliant. He divided human thought into two distinct operating systems. System 1 is fast, instinctive, automatic, and emotional. And System 2 is slower, deliberative, logical, and effortful.
So if we look at the philosophy we were investigating today, feel with the vibes, no need to worry about confirmations, that is essentially a mandate to live your entire life in System 1 while actively suppressing System 2.
Exactly. And Kahneman warns us about a very specific cognitive glitch that occurs when we attempt to navigate complex modern life using only System 1. It is called the substitution trap.
The substitution trap.
Yes. As we mentioned earlier, engaging System 2, doing the actual math, the deep analysis, the fact-checking,
Exhausting.
it requires effort and caloric energy. The brain naturally wants to conserve that energy. So when you are faced with a highly complex question that demands System 2 thinking, System 1 will often quickly and quietly substitute that hard question for an easier one.
Let's ground this for a second. If the hard question is this new investment vehicle structurally sound and legally compliant?
Right. Answering that requires reading a prospectus, understanding market dynamics, verifying the math. It's exhausting. So System 1 intercepts that hard question and substitutes it with an easier one, like, do I like the person selling me this investment? Or does the branding on this website feel professional?
And then the vibe answers that second, easier question.
Exactly. The trap is that the physiological feeling of resolution tricks you into believing you've answered the first question.
Oh, that is dangerous.
There is. You get a good vibe because the salesperson is charming and the website is sleek. But without seeking confirmation, without forcing System 2 to wake up and do the actual work, the crucial question about the actual viability of the investment goes completely unanswered.
You end up making a high-stakes financial decision based on the answer to a completely irrelevant question.
Precisely.
It's the equivalent of a teacher grading a complex calculus exam based entirely on whether the student has nice handwriting.
That is exactly what it is.
It feels like an evaluation. You are looking at the paper, you feel good about the neatness, you hand out an A. But you are measuring the completely wrong metric. The neatness of the ink tells you absolutely nothing about their understanding of calculus.
No.
The danger is just the false confidence it provides.
Which really highlights why we have to apply a risk management matrix to this entire philosophy. We have to map out where living by the vibes is the optimal strategy and where it is a guaranteed path to disaster.
Okay, let's start with the optimal. Where does the vibes only approach actually shine?
It shines in domains where human resonance, emotional connection, and rapid innovation are the primary goals. So creative pursuits, brainstorming sessions, casual socializing, aesthetic choices.
Okay.
If you are painting a canvas, writing a song, or deciding how to arrange your living room, you absolutely want to feel with the vibe.
Because there is no right answer.
Right. In these spaces, demanding empirical confirmation for why a certain chord progression sounds melancholic or why a specific shade of blue feels calming is absurd. It actively kills the creative process.
But the matrix flips entirely when we move into hazardous application environments, right?
Oh, completely. Legal proceedings,
Yeah.
medical diagnoses,
Mm-hmm.
structural engineering, aviation, data security.
All the high-stakes stuff.
Yes. In these fields, the foundational operating principle is the exact opposite of our source quote. It is literally, do not trust the vibes, mandate confirmations.
I can imagine that in aviation especially.
It's a perfect example. Pilots are trained specifically to distrust their physical vibes due to a phenomenon called spatial disorientation.
What is that?
When flying through heavy clouds without visual reference to the horizon, the fluid in a pilot's inner ear can settle during a steady banking turn. So biologically, the pilot's brain will register a vibe that they are flying perfectly straight and level.
No, they aren't.
Right. But the instruments on the dashboard, the empirical confirmations, will show that they are in a steep dive.
Well, that's terrifying.
If the pilot trusts their gut instead of the instruments, the result is tragic. The biological vibe is a lie generated by sensory limitations. The confirmations are the only reality.
So what does this all mean? Like, if the risks of ignoring confirmations in complex systems are so universally high, if it can literally lead to financial ruin, medical malpractice, and planes crashing,
Right.
why is the feel with the vibes philosophy gaining such massive cultural traction right now?
Well, to understand the appeal, we really have to look at how we as a society decide what is true and what is valuable in the modern era. We are experiencing a profound shift in our cultural epistemology.
You know, it seems to me that this reliance on vibes over confirmation is a very natural pushback against the exhausting reality of modern life.
How do you mean?
Well, we live in an era of hyper-bureaucracy and digital surveillance. Every minor action feels like it requires a mountain of proof. We have password fatigue, you have multi-factor authentication, forms in triplicate, background checks for literally everything.
Oh, absolutely.
We are constantly forced to prove our identity and justify our actions to mechanized systems. So pushing back against that and saying, my feelings are valid, my intuition is enough, I don't need a spreadsheet to prove my worth,
Right.
it feels deeply empowering. It is a desperate attempt to reclaim human autonomy in a world that feels increasingly cold and algorithmic.
That is a highly empathetic and accurate read of the cultural climate. It is a pendulum swing away from rigid mechanization, and validating emotional autonomy is a healthy psychological step.
Look, sure.
But we have to be incredibly careful about how far that pendulum is allowed to swing. If we connect this to the bigger picture, taking this mindset to its absolute extreme endpoint introduces a profound societal risk.
Because we lose facts.
Exactly. If we collectively decide that empirical confirmations no longer matter, we risk creating a broad post-truth environment. In this extreme scenario, an individual's internal subjective feelings are granted the exact same weight as demonstrable objective facts.
It conflates how something feels with what it actually is.
And that removes the shared safety net of objective reality. Like, if you feel strongly that a certain scientific reality is a hoax, and I feel strongly that it is true, and neither of us believes that empirical data has the authority to settle the debate, we no longer share a reality. We cannot collaborate. A functioning society requires a shared baseline of confirmed facts to build legal systems, protect public health, and maintain infrastructure.
Otherwise, it all falls apart.
Yes. When vibes replace facts entirely, consensus becomes impossible, and the cohesion that holds society together begins to fracture.
It's a sobering realization, especially when you consider how casually the phrase gets tossed around online. To synthesize everything we've pulled from the research today, feel with the vibes, no need to worry about confirmations, is a fantastic heuristic for low-stakes, creative, or highly social environments.
Absolutely.
If you are at a dinner party, brainstorming a marketing concept, or deciding what movie to watch, let the vibes lead. Speed and human resonance are the only metrics that matter there.
But as a universal operating system for navigating the complexities of the modern world, it is fundamentally broken. It leaves you vulnerable to your own hidden biases, it causes your brain to substitute hard realities for easy feelings, and it completely strips away our ability to accurately assess high-stakes environments.
The confirmations are the safety net that catches us when our intuition inevitably hallucinates.
Well said.
As we wrap up this deep dive into the source material, I want to leave you, our listener, with a final thought to chew on. something that builds off the realization that our intuition, our vibes, relies entirely on recognizing patterns from our past experiences.
Mm.
If our vibes are solely a product of what we have already seen and lived through, what happens when the world begins to change so rapidly that our past is no longer a reliable guide for our future?
That is a great question.
With the rise of unprecedented technologies, shifting global climates, and entirely new ways of interacting, the patterns our brains learned 10 years ago might be completely useless tomorrow. If we rely only on our vibes in an unprecedented era, are we just driving forward at 100 miles an hour while staring entirely into the rearview mirror?
Wow.
Something to think about the next time you are tempted to just trust your gut without checking the map. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We appreciate your curiosity, and we'll catch you on the next one.